Hey, Joe Zarzaur here with Dr. Malone to talk about CoolSculpting. Obviously, we deal with medical malpractice cases in our daily practice here at Zarzaur Law. And one of the types of cases that we end up working on sometimes are these elective plastic surgery type procedures. This CoolSculpting is not necessarily a surgery, it's a procedure obviously that was taking place in a lot of plastic surgery offices. But recently, the company that made Allergan Aesthetics, I think is the name of the company, that made the machine that does the CoolSculpting, which is, they don't actually make an incision, but the theory was this machine would freeze the fat cells from outside of the body, and that the fat cells would then sort of be eaten up by the body's, they kill the fat cells, if you will, with cold therapy, and then the dead fat cells would absorb into the body naturally, if I'm speaking correctly, Dr. Malone.
Yeah.
But that was the theory behind this, and then they started to have more problems with a phenomenon known as paradoxical adipose, what is it called?
Hypertrophy.
Hypertrophy, where the actual fat was not dying and reabsorbing, but was actually becoming larger and formed masses that had to be surgically removed. There was a supermodel. What was the supermodel's name?
Evangelista.
Evangelista.
Linda Evangelista.
She had a case against them for $50 million. That ended up settling for a confidential amount, and they probably bought her silence with that settlement agreement, I'm guessing. And then shortly thereafter, there was a recall of one or more of the component parts used in the CoolSculpting process. And now, as recently as this past weekend, there was a front page article in the New York Times about the fact that a lot of these PAH contraindication episodes are probably being underreported. So I just wanted you to speak briefly, if you could, Dr. Malone, about this phenomenon PAH, and what happens in this what the theory was, and maybe speak medically about how the doctors have to fix this and it goes wrong with this.
So CoolSculpting is an alternative to liposuction. And when you are unfortunate and have the complication of PAH, you know what the fix is? Liposuction.
Oh, that's how they get it out?
Yeah.
It's probably harder to get it out.
If the thought is I'm trying to avoid surgery, but I might get a complication that's going to require surgery, that's what these people need to be considering ahead of time, the patients and the doctor.
And CoolSculpting is not cheap. It was like $3,500 or something.
Yeah.
Like it's not like a $25 procedure you can get on Groupon. It's like it's a major deal.
And many times there's more than one application. So you go in for one, then go right back in for another. Anyhow, the idea is you basically freeze the fat cells and kill them. And then, as you mentioned, they are destructed and absorbed into the body or through some of your hair follicles. There's fat output from your hair follicles. That's like when you feel like you got grease in your hair and your skin, that it would come out that way as well. That's a very simplified version of it. The paradoxical adipose hypertrophy, there are theories as to why and how it happens. The most simple is it's basically survival of the fittest. So the fittest of your fat cells are the ones that are going to survive this. Those are the strongest ones. So then they respond to that insult by growing. Okay, wow. That's the one theory. The other one is that the injury causes blood vessel development to the injured fat, and then it grows from there. Okay, because you have more blood supply. So there are some theories as to why it happens. They say that the research has shown that it happens more commonly in men than women, in Latina and Hispanic populations, and that what is not accounted for in some of the data you're talking about is repeat applications, or if I go in and I have one treatment, it's not just one treatment, it's one treatment in multiple locations perhaps. Each one of those should have been a treatment, each location. So at the outset, the data was supposedly skewed in that this was listed as a rare complication because over the denominator was a huge number, okay? The amount of treatments that they were counting these things as, it wasn't reflective of what was going on. So the percentage was much lower. So it looked like it was like 0.01% of the time you can get this complication.
It was actually closer to 10%.
Yeah, and when you say that, well, only 10% of patients were male, but in all the males that are getting it, they actually said, like, there's a lot of guys that are getting this, okay? Right. So the idea was, it wasn't accounted for perhaps because it doesn't show up right away. And 6 months down the line, 9 months down the line, maybe a patient doesn't say, maybe I need to call that plastic surgeon back or that spa back and tell them that this is going on. So those were lost, that data was lost. And then the data that was captured wasn't being accounted for, like how many treatments did they actually have? Right. So how common was this?
And just because you have a negative experience with CoolSculpting doesn't mean you have this, and it doesn't mean it's because something was wrong with the machine. So there's a lot of that to consider. From a legal perspective, elective procedures are hard to pursue as a medical malpractice case on their own, because basically jurors see you're doing this not because you have to, but because you want to. And so there's just from a jury perspective and a case value perspective, it's not like you were doing something that you needed for your existence. So when we evaluate these plastic surgery cases like CoolSculpting or whatever it may be, it's going to be in a whole different kind of threshold than we would any other kind of medical procedure that's not elective.
Can I add that the articles that I've pulled some we're going to share, they'd say this isn't like avoided at all costs, but if you're going to get it done, don't go to just the medical spa where it's an unlicensed technician doing this, because in some states or parts of states, that's what's going on. Go to a doctor's office, go to a plastic surgeon's office. Yeah, physician, go to plastic surgeon's office, go to a dermatologist's office. Go to a physician that is going to assess the risk with you and explain, this is what we expect. And yeah, you're going to follow up with me. You're going to see me. And if we catch this earlier, you don't maybe require the surgery to get rid of it. So there are ways to temporize this. So it's not avoided at all costs. But as Joe mentioned, if you do have the complication, you want to be in the right hands, not just like where you're calling some fly-by-night spa.
Yeah, we'll put a link to these articles underneath the video. If you have any questions about medical malpractice cases or any kind of personal injury case, you can find us on the web at zarzaurlaw.com, or you can call us at 855-HIRE-JOE. Thank you.